Why do you think so many people with good hearts still end up begging for love from the wrong person?
Huh. What a question. Well, I mean, I think there's lots and lots of reasons. But I think at the core, we throwing myself in there in the past of having been a bit misguided or stumbled and wanted to give love and gave it to the wrong people. I think a lot of it comes down to how we think about love in the first place. Like, what is the point of a relationship? It's so ingrained into our purpose and into culture and into expectations, as it well should be. But I don't think we've taken time to really think about what is the point of having a permanent roommate in life. And so I could talk a lot about what I think the optimistic vision of love should be. I wrote my upcoming book, The Opposite of Settling, from the perspective of I did an episode on my podcast like a year ago about the phrasing settle down and how I really didn't like it, even subconsciously. Like, we all say, oh, I want to settle down. And to us, that's like a sign of maturity, and it's like a sign of clarity. But for me, just the language of settle down, I think reinforces the fact that we've lost sight of what the purpose of a relationship is. I cannot rationalize the purpose of love having anything to do with down or less. Certainly so when you find someone and you're committed, yeah, there is a settling down in that you're not dating other people. But that's the only down. Down means less. To me, the right love means one thing. It helps you become more of yourself. And that's something that I think a lot of people lose. Like, to your point, like, we give and we give and we give and we want to make something work, and we overlook red flags and we overlook an imbalance, and we slowly lose little bits of ourself. And that's where I think so many people have found themselves in dating, that I think we need a refresh on the purpose of love and to see it through the lens of amplification, of more. And that is how we gauge the health of a relationship. That is, it makes us feel like more of ourselves. It makes us feel more independent, more ambitious. These things that so often we think about, oh, a relationship is the old ball and chain. It's settling down. It's suburbs and boring and less. And I think that does it such a disservice. For one, that's a horrible sales pitch, but two, we've internalized that to think that that's, it is what it is. I think we need to look at a relationship, the purpose of love, through the lens of, does it make me feel like more of myself?
Do you think there's something like from a physiological level that goes on where, in many ways we're wired to chase, we're wired to like win and success and stuff, that we feel that if something just feels like too easy, that there's something off with it, where if we're like got somebody or somebody has someone that's maybe just difficult to work with, they're not getting the love they want, that they feel if they can convince them to love them, they're winning something.
Yeah. Well, I think it's big. I did a whole chapter on that notion. I call it struggle love. Struggle love. The idea, this ingrained notion in us, that all love is a struggle until it's not. That all love is chaotic and up and down and convincing and all this chaos until it's not. This idea that, like, you have to work your way through convincing them to commit to you, that you have to work your way through all of the BS until it's finally the love you deserve. And yes, certainly so. A relationship will always require emotional, some sacrifice, a little bit of compromise, a little bit of putting yourself in their shoes, a little bit of a struggle, certainly. But we've gotten this weird notion that love is something you have to fight for and then win, and that the fighting for and winning will require this negotiating, and that we've internalized this idea that all love is like that until it's the love that you want. And I've just seen so many people get into situations where they say, okay, this is going to be a struggle. Let me sign up. And the struggle includes things like convincing them of the purpose of a relationship, not just to commit to you, but like, what is the purpose of a relationship? And now you're convincing them to, agree that monogamy is a good thing, for instance. And it's just become this thing where we think that we have to fight and negotiate, and then we'll have the love that we want. And I think it's really imbalance the scales, where, yes, of course, you do have to fight and you do have to work for things, but it should never be this negotiation of proving the purpose of a relationship, of proving your worth. So yeah, I think the reason, to your question, the reason we do it is we think that we have to. We think that love, as it's been portrayed to us, as we've seen it play out in past frustrating relationships, is that anytime you approach a relationship, it's going to become this massive struggle until it's not. And you just got to get to that point where it's not. And that's why we stick it out. That's why we fight for people who aren't fighting for us. That's why we negotiate. And that's why ultimately we become less of ourselves.
And you're touching on something that I think is a problem now. There's a lot of talk on how people aren't as committed to relationships now. We're in this like mating crisis. People are having a hard time dating. The modern dating world, I think, is tough for people at times. And like, what do you think is at the root of people when they're like trying to commit to dating, but they're like in that almost dating phase? They're in that almost dating stage and they're not fully committed to like jumping into the dating realm.
I don't know, man. I mean, in my 20s, I that was me for sure. And now that I'm 37 and I've found my life partner, I look at it and I'm like, well, that's just crazy. Like, why are you doing something but you don't know why you're doing it? Or why are you 80% committed to finding a partner but 20% you don't know why? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think there's social, cultural, dating apps, expectations, gender roles. I think there's a lot to be said there. At the end of the day, though, I think people just don't have a strong why of why they're dating, and they're trying to figure it out by dating. And I think, of course, that's a very frustrating thing for people on the receiving end. I think for the most part, a lot of people date from uh, emptiness, right? We date as an aversion to being alone. And so we don't want to feel lonely. We don't want to be alone. So we'll date, we'll fill that cup up, and then we'll be like, well, I still don't know what I really want. So I'll just go back. And we just go back and forth and back and forth. Really the book is about dating from wholeness and the fact that like you don't find fulfillment in life through love. You find love through fulfillment. In that the more that you fill your life with purpose and joy and ambition and direction, the more I am convinced, and there's a lot of different psychology and research I reference in the book, the more that will lead you to your person because you've filled your cup and you just let it overflow. You're not trying to force someone into your life in response to loneliness or in response to fear. I call this whole concept out of town confidence, which is this idea that, maybe you can relate, like when you're traveling and you're out of town, maybe when you come down to Miami, you've got a little more swag in your step, you got a little bit more confidence because you're not burdened by expectations. You're here to have a good time. If you meet someone, that's fine, but it's not the focus, right? You're not trying to force that. And that's what the whole concept is. If you can have that out of town confidence mindset toward life, that means you are filling your life with all this goodness such that the only barometer for someone's place in your life is that they amplify it. And I think if we had that mentality a bit more, we wouldn't be seeking people out of fear, which leads to all kinds of situationships and chaotic dynamics. We would be seeking people out of amplification because we know ourselves and they know themselves, and it removes this like two halves coming together type thing. And I think between those two things, it would probably save a lot of people the frustration of meeting someone who doesn't really know what they want, but they know enough that they're willing to date, and then they just hurt your feelings. So that's kind of the mindset that I advocate for.
Yeah, and Mark Manson says something like, "If you want to find like the right partner, become the person you want to date." It's very in line with what you just said, and yeah, and I think a harsh truth that I've kind of shared over the years is like your people's external worlds, in many cases, a reflection about how they feel inside. If you feel like crap about yourself, you're going to settle for the wrong person. You're going to settle in your career and stuff like that because your confidence and self worth isn't reflective of that. Like, what have you found like for yourself for some of the top habits that you've done over the years to build your self worth and to really build like real confidence?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true, right? I mean, like what we're talking about is like a big cliche, right? Like love yourself and you'll find someone who loves you. And like we're all saying the same thing in different way. Me, you, Mark, and it's amazing. We all know this to be true, but we struggle with it because we're human. I think like the biggest thing is like how do you date instead of trying to date to be liked, you date to be seen. And it's a huge difference, right? When you date just to be liked and validated by someone else, you fall victim to all kinds of misguided motivations. I talk in the book about this thing called the liking gap, which is the social and psychological and research backed observation that the majority of the time you are more likable than you think you are. It's called the liking gap, the difference between how you perceive yourself and how the majority of other people see you. And they ran all these experiments to show that for the most part, you are more liked by other people, by strangers, than you think. And I really want us to internalize that, because when we don't believe that, we don't think we're that likable. The moment someone comes along and shows you some attention, shows you some affection, likes you, we just short circuit, right? Because we're out here thinking that, oh, we're not that lovable, not that likable, not that attractive. And then someone comes along. So I think to your point, I think the best habit is to have a little bit more confidence in yourself, to realize that you are more likable than you think you are. I also talk in the book about the idea of nonconformity as a really attractive trait. Nonconformity being a fancier word for being weird or passionate or intense, or like outlier traits that you think disqualify you from finding your person. And I talk in the book about how not only are you more likable than you think you are, the liking gap, but non-conforming traits are overwhelmingly perceived as attractive. And those are two opposites, right? We don't think we're that likable. We think that being too much, showing up on the first date as being too passionate or intense or quirky, is the wrong thing. It's been shown time and time again that it's attractive to the right people. So I always say that if you can just find a way to tap into your passionate and most intense self, it's going to be a filter for the wrong people and a magnet for the right people. It's going to sting, of course, because who wants to experience filtering out the wrong people? But it's the best mentality to have. And then going back, the only way to be that person is to know who you are, to your point. So yeah, I think it all goes hand in hand. Date to be seen, don't date to be liked, I think is the ultimate takeaway.
What about fitness? I know you're a big workout guy. I love the gym. What role do you think fitness has on self worth?
Well, I can only speak from it from a male perspective, but I think it's everything. I mean, I think, outside of like how you treat your body is, is outer respect is inner respect. And if you don't treat your body in a respectful way with what you put in it and how you move it, what does that say about your self-worth? What does it say about discipline? What does it say about, the really important things? For one, at like a deeper level. For two, I mean, it gives you confidence. Like whatever you can do to give yourself confidence, whether it's to wear better clothes and better fitting clothes, or to work out and get big, or to work out and get smaller, whatever your ambition is, I think those things are fine. I'm not a huge fan of the like, just be yourself and someone will come to you. Sometimes you've got to step up your game, right? We live in a visual world. We live in a dating app world. I'm a big fan of dating apps. I don't boo-hoo them. I don't say dating apps have ruined the world. I think it just changes the dynamic. So yeah, you've got to find a way to present your best self. And I think if you find yourself stuck, go get in the gym, go do something crazy, go do a high rocks, go do CrossFit, start running, do a marathon, just do something to push yourself, for one, psychologically, and for two, it brings your best physical self to the front. And I think that's really important, as I'm sure you would agree.
I totally agree. And I think there's no other thing that you can do that helps you build confidence, discipline, gets you comfortable being uncomfortable, establishes, showing up for yourself when you don't want to. Like all these things that the gym can do that then like transfers over into interpersonal relationships, right? Because all of what I just mentioned occurs in relationships too. They're going to be uncomfortable at times. You got to show up even when you don't feel like it. You got to develop discipline, like all these things. And there's just a direct, I think, correlation with that. You talked about like being weird, being quirky, going all in, and why that can be very important, which I totally agree. I think there can be a line where people come on too strong and they come off desperate energy, right? How can people separate those two things between it coming across passionate, excited about meeting somebody, but not like coming across so desperate that the other person becomes turned off?
Yeah, that's the balance, right? Well, I'd say if you are tapped into what we talked about for the past 10 minutes about motivation to date, to feel seen, not to be liked, to date from wholeness, not loneliness, then desperation is not part of the picture, because you have realized as an independent person that for your whole life, you've never waited around for someone to save you. You never waited for someone to give you joy or safety. You created it for yourself. And I think if that's your mentality, you'll never have a sense of desperation about you. But if you don't, yeah, people can sense desperation because you're tapped into just fear based dating. I think you know talking about like quirkiness or weirdness, like these are terms that are thrown around a lot, and sometimes yeah, it's like that's too much, that's weird, that's desperate, that's performative. I think you know I talk in the book about this concept called emotional bids for connection. It was coined by the Gottman Institute, which has done like the longest standing research on healthy relationships. And the way that you relate to someone, of course, is everything, right? That's how you define compatibility. That's how you define a healthy relationship. One of the top ones in these bids, like a bid for connection, is me saying, "How was your day?" Or a physical bid, rubbing your shoulders, or having a deep conversation. One of the top bids for connection, the way that you give and receive emotionally, is shared weirdness, mutual weirdness, shared humor. So as much as I'm like, let's not be like performative weirdos, I think it really is an essential quality of finding someone who you don't have to filter that out. You could throw weirdness, personality, intensity, passion at them, and they throw it right back. That is essential for a healthy relationship. The Gottman Institute did all these different studies, and they followed couples for decades, and they could tell very quickly whether a couple would have the resilience and the receptivity towards each other to be in a healthy long-term relationship just by how those bids are given and received. If someone doesn't receive it and give back, they could tell very quickly. So I mean, as much as, again, I'm not about like being too much, you could tell a lot about whether you're going to work out with someone about how they receive your passion and your intensity. You should absolutely look for someone who welcomes it and dishes it right back. And there's no better way to tell than to just bring your most vivacious self to the first date and go from there, because you recognize that is a bid for connection, and it's essential.
Yeah, my fiance and I often joke around that like we should have like a reality show because people will think sometimes like that we're weird, like we're very weird towards each other. Like there's stuff that we do, that I would never like want my like family to see. 'Cause they'd be like, dude, you're so weird. But I think it just speaks to the fact that it's important to be yourself and to not be so serious. I think that while relationships are serious, they don't have to be all serious, if you know what I mean. Like you gotta like let it go a little bit.
I love that as a topic because I don't know. Your dynamic with your fiance is probably similar to my dynamic with my girlfriend. Like, we are so weird and goofy together. And yes, we take our relationship seriously, but everything else is goofy. And I even have a chapter where jokingly, because it sounds really cringe, I jokingly refer to it as two silly gooses. Because, like, we have, like, talking about like losing the plot, we have gotten so serious about relationships. I mean, look at everything nowadays is serious. Like, it's attachment styles and narcissist, and he didn't pull out my chair on the first date, and this, and she's crazy, and he's liar. All very real things, of course. But we are just bombarded with all this content that dating has become this such a serious thing. And it is a serious thing, right? Because you're choosing a life partner. What's more serious than that? But like, I really advocate for a love that returns you to a state of play. I talk in the book about it for a whole chapter about playfulness as the ultimate gift of being in a relationship. It returns you to that childlike state of play. And I think if you find that, it is such a gift. And it should also be the thing that helps you gauge the health of a relationship. Like, how playful can you be with each other? Because it shows all of the like more serious things. Do they judge you? Do they join in? Do they have the receptivity toward an emotional bid? I think it's everything. And I think it's so important. And I talk in the book about it. It's like sense of humor in a relationship is so important. And it's not just like, do you laugh at each other's jokes? It's, do you create shared humor? They did these studies on like what makes a couple sticky, and it's shared humor. Can you come together, be playful together, and create shared moments of just goofiness and humor? That is the key. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And we need to return to that. And I think if we approached it a little bit more like strong boundaries, strong standards, but playfulness, I think we're gonna quickly learn a lot about a partner. And I think it's everything. So I'm glad you've found that. It's a beautiful thing, and you should share about what your goofiness is live sometime on the show.
We've got this kitten who you may have seen. He always like jumps on my desk in the middle of interviews, and the amount of like fun we have with this cat. And I've never been a cat person. We actually had to put my dog down a few months ago, and um, so I was always kind of a dog guy. But like the amount of like fun we've created in our relationship around this kitten, at times is embarrassing because we're so like obsessed with him and all the like funny antics he does. But that's just like I think a good example of how together we've created this frame that we have this humorous approach to how we raise our kitten and some of the stuff that he does and how we interact with that, and just our level of like play at cracking jokes with each other, and I think that that's part of what I think makes a relationship like really work. And I think the other thing too is you mentioned standards. I think that in today's world, we've kind of lost the plot a little bit too. When people set standards in relationships, people will say that they're controlling. When it's really like, no, you have to like know like what you stand for and set boundaries and standards, and know that those are your standards. They're not the other person's standards. Like you have to agree to those though at the beginning. Like talk about that, like because I think we've lost the plot on that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, standards are one of those topics that the internet is rah rah about, right? There are just, we've become this like very savage generation where it's like, here's my standards, be gone otherwise. And it's really cascaded into this like catch feelings, not flights. And I only give what I receive, and I only match energy. And man, it hurts me to hear things like that because those are reactions to past pain, right? Of course. Someone who says, I only match energy, I only give what I receive, that is a direct result of you having given and loved and it wasn't returned. And so you've built these standards as a result that are now in total reaction to someone else's behavior. And I suppose that's fair logic, right? I very much advocate for, retreating if you're not given in the same way. But I think when it comes to like standards, for instance, a lot of our standards are not born from our experiences. They're born from other people's experiences, and they're born from social media. So I really advocate for people to take a look at their standards and say, okay, here's my standard. Here's where it's come from. I call them like standards 1.0 and 2.0. 1.0 standards are internet standards, things that you hear, oh, they should do this and that. Standards 2.0 are, I have this standard because, and then you point to life experience. So I'd really advocate for people to really audit their life and realize what are they living as a result of experience and what they're living as a result of expectations and influence. And then on the like give energy, match energy front, I think when people have this like I only give what I receive energy, they think that they're doing that as a way to protect themselves. And I suppose that's true in theory, but I think it's the most passive way to live your life. I advocate fully for people to give love first, to be willing to show interest first, to be willing to make the first move if you want. And from there is when your standard kicks in. Then you say, okay, is this received? But to do it in the other order, I think is just a passive way of living your life. You're only then going to interact with people who give first. You're going to deduct half the world from your possible partnership. So I really advocate for people to be willing to check the ego and come back to a place of a willingness to give first and see where it goes, and to not get bought into this catch flights, not feelings, savage mentality. Love is a very interesting thing. Love is both giving and receiving. And as much as obviously you want to be with someone who you give love to and they give love right back, there is purpose in giving love in life, even if it's not received in return. Just the act of giving and loving, not only does it teach you a lot about yourself, but it is a core experience in life. Many core experiences come from things that are temporary. So I really do advocate for people to not let standards become this thing that puts walls up, to not let them become boundaries that they lean on to keep people out. A lot of people are talking, and I talk about it as well, as like the point of a boundary is to let people in, not to keep them out. You let them in, you open the gates, and then from there, you are laser eyes on them, observing them and judging them through the lens of reciprocity. But it's not to keep people out. You should love first, be willing to be enthusiastic first, let people in, and that's when your standards and boundaries kick in.
You brought up a really good point. I think that for one, I think if you're a guy and you're not like giving and trying to, treat a girl right at the beginning, I think you're going to push a lot of people away because they're going to see that as a sign of disinterest, right? If you're not like, asking them out, and you're not like offering to pay on the first date and stuff like that. And I also think that we've been sold this lie that relationships are 50-50. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that, to anybody who's ever been in a long-term relationship, that like sometimes, yeah, we'll be 50-50. I mean, sure. There's other times where it's like 70-30, it's like 80-20. Like people are going to go through stuff. You're going to have somebody that's struggling emotionally. You're going to have somebody that maybe goes through like something in their career. You're going to have somebody who's sick. And it's like, well, what are you going to say? Like, oh my gosh, like I've already given my 50, so I can't really help you if you have the flu. Like that would not go over too well, right? And I think that's just a reality that people have to accept, is that you have to just, and it goes back to like giving unconditionally, leading from the heart, leading from this place of wholeness and not brokenness.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, yeah, we've gotten lost in the sauce of that a little bit, where it's like, all right, here's all I have to give, and I give here, and then I'm out. And of course, a relationship requires dynamic, and we could talk all day about how, yeah, it's 80-20 and then 90-10 and then 50-50, and it's great. I think the key in whatever circumstance presents itself that does move the scales a little bit, the key is to not allow that to ever become resentment. That like referencing the Gottman Institute, resentment is the number one killer of relationship. That is, something bothers you and you bottle it up. You don't feel respected or wanted one day, you bottle it up. Resentment is corrosive, and eventually it will kill the relationship. So amidst that time where you're like, oh my gosh, like I only have 20% to give right now because of XYZ. It could be you're really busy in your career, you're having family issues, you're having health issues, whatever it may be. It's essential that you communicate your desire to be fully in the relationship, and they communicate back how they're feeling about it. And that's the most boring subject in the world. We're just talking about being open and honest and communicating, but that's everything. And that's what allows for the 80-20 to then go to 50-50 and 60-40. But without that, you're screwed. You're absolutely screwed, because we bottle things up. And inevitably, yeah, if my girlfriend only has 10% to give for months on end, yeah, eventually it's going to make me feel a certain way. But if I know that she is fully committed and fully in the relationship, this is just a temporary time where I need to, have the weight of the relationship on my back, I'm fine with it. But it has to be communicated. Otherwise, you're screwed.
How do you prevent resentment from destroying a relationship without consistently sweating the small stuff and being petty?
I mean, the small stuff is what's going to kill a relationship, right? I mean, how many times have you seen the little things become the big things? And like that's where it's like not doing the dishes, not taking out the trash, being messy, being dirty, being inconsiderate. Little things that deserve a little bit of conversation and a little bit of criticism. If you don't bring those up, though, it becomes the next thing along the lines of things that kill a relationship. And the Gottmans talk about it: contempt, where the very act of not doing the dishes becomes in their mind evidence that you don't appreciate them. It becomes a little thing that maybe in your mind you don't even think about the dishes because who cares, and you live in filth and you've never done the dishes your whole life. So to you, it's just ingrained habit. But to them, the fact that you don't even care enough to do the dishes means you don't care about them, you're selfish, and you're no longer committed to the relationship. So that's how the little things become the big things. And we know this to be true. So I think it's twofold. One, it's to communicate that. And two, it's to do the little things that you don't want to do. I always talk about how love is the art of noticing each other, noticing each other's ups and downs, opening your freaking eyes and ears to your partner. You just see it a lot in relationships where people just tune out. And there's a lot to be said about how that happens, I suppose. But it makes me so sad when people just like they turn off their empathy for their partner. And that's when those little things become big, big blind spots. So yeah, I think how to avoid letting the little things become the big things. Well, communicate it for one, and then two, be the person who does the little things. Like my girlfriend always wants to jump and do the dishes, but I don't let her do it alone because I realize that that could become such a divisive, silly point. Why would I ever want to let it become there? I don't want to do the dishes, but I'm willing to, so it doesn't become that big thing. It doesn't become contempt. It doesn't become resentment.
What's something that you and your girlfriend have had to work on that you still struggle with?
I mean, lots of little things. Like I'm very impatient with myself, with other people. And, she kind of dilly dallies and getting ready and, stuff, whatever. I've had to get a lot better at just letting her breathe and chilling out and, recognizing that, when she feels rushed, reminds her of various elements of her upbringing where her parents would rush her. And I don't want to become that stressed. So I think we've had to become a lot better at that. Working on communication as well. I think I used to be somewhat not bottled up necessarily, but I just wouldn't bring up tough topics. I think we've gotten a lot better at that. Um, and yeah, I think independence is a big one that I've really come around to in my relationship with her. I used to be a typical dude where again, the whole idea here is the thought of a relationship. I used to think a relationship would inevitably rob me of my independence, both literally but also soulfully independence when it comes to ambitions and worth and fulfillment. And I've just realized, and this is frankly why I wrote the book, that the right relationship amplifies your independence. It makes you more independent. The opening chapter, I talk about this thing called the dependency paradox, which is just the idea, the observation in childhood, that the closer a parent or caregiver is with their child, the more independent the child is willing to be, right? Because they know mommy or daddy or caregiver has their back, so they're willing to run away and take a first step and fall and be hurt because they have that closeness. So the closeness is proportional to their independence. And I've always thought that was a beautiful thing. And why can't that be true? Why isn't that true a lot of the time in a relationship, in an adult relationship? And it's because of our perception of independence. We think, oh, if he wants to do something without me, or he's willing to think about I and not we, that means something's broken in the relationship. We have this weird perception of independence. Whereas now with my girlfriend, I feel like we're equally more independent on our own. She's a DJ. She's always doing things and has this whole ambition in life outside of me that, yes, I am there for and I amplify, but she's never been more independent. And same with me. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And that's not only what we should strive for, it's also something that we should gauge the health of a relationship through. How independent do I feel? How independent does he or she feel? I think is an essential question. And that's something that my girlfriend and I work through. And now it's just like a beautiful part of the relationship.
You're touching on the subject of emotional maturity, which I think men at times can have a hard time with because they're afraid of coming across as being, quote unquote weak or too vulnerable. Like, how can guys get better at becoming emotionally mature without appearing weak?
Yeah. Well, I don't understand why a lot of men think that way. Maybe I'm off base, but I think it's a weird mentality to think that being emotionally self-sufficient, being emotionally present means weakness. I see it as emotional honesty. And more what's more masculine than being emotionally honest to say, hey, I don't like that, or this makes me feel a certain way. I think that's the ultimate sign of confidence. So I always get a little thrown by men who are like, well, I don't want to become soft and vulnerable. Yeah, of course, this isn't about like crying because you see a beautiful sunrise. We're talking about if something bothers you as a man, you bring it up. If your girlfriend says something that hurts you, you bring it up. You don't bottle it up, and you see it as a sign of confidence that you're willing to bring it up. So I don't know. To me, it's always been a weird thing where, men see emotional presence as this vulnerability. To me, it's always like whenever you speak to your emotions, you always win. Always, every single time, because you either get what you want or you get what you need. On the get what you want front, you say, hey, Emily, my girlfriend, you said something earlier that really hurt my feelings. And then you talk through it and you realize that she didn't mean it. And you grow closer as a result of that conversation. You got what you need. You got what you wanted. Or you get what you need and you bring it up and she's like, well, you're being a little pansy about it. Like, grow up, be a man. You're, oh, what is that really someone I want to be with? And then you got what you needed. You got the clarity. So, to me, it's always a win-win when you speak to your emotions and in a practical, tangible way. So I don't know. I think honesty and presence is like the most masculine trait you could ever have, and branding it that way instead of seeing it as a weakness, I think can be helpful to a lot of men.
Yeah. And I think one of the patterns that people have a hard time with, especially when it comes to like diving into relationships and being timid about dating and the 80-20, like we said, is that people feel like they've been someone's like backup plan for years, and they've repeated that pattern. Um, and how can somebody like rebuild like how they view relationships like after they feel they've been someone's backup plan?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I mean, I think, you know, it's, and I talk about it in the book for a chapter. It's a weird thing the way that if we've felt like someone's backup plan for a while and we've found ourselves in patterns of situationships and like inconsistent love, in a weird way, we become attracted to it. Like intermittent reinforcement of love, when someone gives love and then takes love away and gives love and takes love away, it's addictive. It's a weird thing. We are attracted to familiarity, and in a sense we're attracted to the chaos of that familiarity very subconsciously, because of course talking through it you'd be like, no, of course I don't want to be someone's backup plan, of course I want someone's consistency, but we're attracted to the predictability of that dynamic. And I think we lose sight of that a lot in the face of the flip side, which is when we finally do receive something that is consistent, it feels boring. And we have all kinds of ways of rationalizing how boring isn't right for us, because we want sparks and we want butterflies and we want all these things. So, I think we have to wrap our heads around the fact that if all we've ever known is chaos and inconsistency and backup plans, when finally someone comes along and is actually reciprocal and mutual and at the same depth, it might feel a little bit boring. And we shouldn't react to that in a knee jerk way. We should be prepared to sit in that and say, okay, this is unfamiliar to me, but maybe this is good for me. And I think particularly when people are young and in their 20s and they find something that's safe for once, it feels odd. But safety should be the ultimate goal of a relationship, because it encompasses all the things we're talking about here: emotional bids, shared weirdness, independence, safety within that. If you've never known safety, safety feels boring, safety feels weird. It taps into all of those avoidant, dismissive tendencies that you might have. So be willing to sit in that, I would say, and realize that sparks and butterflies are nice and great, but safety and peace is the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And I know you and I are both good friends with Jillian Taraki, and she, kind of echoes this and says something like chemistry can be a really bad like sign of compatibility, because if you're somebody that just only goes off chemistry and then all of a sudden like down the road, you find out that wasn't the person because you were so overly infatuated, like that's a problem. And along those same lines, you see so many people like they'll post like a couple photo on the internet. They'll say, I met my soulmate. This is fate. And then they find out they're just repeating some toxic pattern that they've done over and over again. How can people, like, you think, get better at like sidestepping that intense chemistry they feel at the beginning?
Yeah, yeah, Jillian's great. And that's a great point. I don't know. I mean, I think I think the best answer is just freaking relax for a second. And like I never want to like devalue the purpose of love and commitment, but the experience is what is enjoyable. Getting to know someone and sharing those first dates, second date, first month, third month, 6 month, first year, that is enjoyable. Enjoy that part rather than rushing to this is my twin flame soulmate, lock it down, commitment, shared mortgage. Like, yes, hopefully that will come and I want that for you. But what is the point of love? The point of love is to experience love. And yes, that will come in stages, just getting to know each other, known each other, very comfortable with each other, married and kids with each other, all different stages. If you are rushing through the first stage and second stage and third stage just to get to that final stage, you're missing out on the whole purpose. The whole purpose, I hate to be that guy who's like, it's about the journey, not the destination, but the whole purpose is the experience and the moments. And that's why, like, even in the book, I talk about like being able to look back at a past relationship that maybe even became horrible and toxic and ended in a tumultuous dumpster fire of a way. I think the greatest sign of wisdom is to be able to look back at the memories you had with that person and appreciate them, and to not label them at, well, because the end was so bad that everything prior to that was crap. That ability is wise, for one, and two, it reminds us in the present that when we're with someone, just enjoy the process. Yes, have your standards and your boundaries and your red flag radar on, so you don't become naive and you get lost in the enjoyment of the process. But we have to remember that is the purpose of love, like to enjoy the moments where you're falling in love, where you feel in love, and then yes, when you're fully committed and in love. But don't try to rush ahead. Don't try to say, okay, we have chemistry, this is my soulmate, lock it down, and that you're just rushing ahead. I think would really help people to move at a slower pace, be a bit more patient, have their eyes open in a bigger way, and then then hopefully get to the point where it is commitment.
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception, is that when there's a huge spark at the beginning, that means you're going to be with each other forever. I think the right frame of mind is, if you can survive like the first year with someone, there's a good chance it's going to last a lot longer. Because if you can't survive when things are good, like that, when thing, the honeymoon, the initial phase, it's like, well, how are you going to survive when the relationship gets like kind of daunting? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Enjoy that first part. I mean, I always say that like the beginning, and this isn't to boo-hoo it, but the beginning of a relationship isn't real necessarily, because you're both showing up in your best form. You're avoiding conflict. You're avoiding arguments. Enjoy that. And then get to the conflict and the drama and observe that, and then move forward. So the beginning of dating should be enjoyable. It should not be this stressful thing. And again, the whole idea. Actually, Jillian had a great line too. Back to Jillian, she was talking about how love should make you happier, not happy. Again, the whole idea of what I'm talking about, that we're talking about, that we're all circling, that we know, is you don't date from emptiness, you date from fulfillment. I talk in the book about this thing. It's called this. There was a book by James Hillman called The Soul's Code, which is basically the idea that similar to how like an acorn can only become an oak tree, can't become a banana plant, can't become anything else. Inside of us, we all have a unique spark and essence. One thing, one purpose that we could try to self-edit and we could try to ignore, but like it is our destiny to bring that to life. The same idea of love should support the essence of that thing. It shouldn't replace it. It shouldn't become a blind vision. We shouldn't be desperate in the search of it. We should be happy. And then someone comes along and makes us happier. I think that also really helps protect us in those instances of really wanting to put labels on things: soulmate, twin flame, compatibility, things that make us lose sight of the point of a relationship is amplification. The point of a relationship is to help us feel like more of ourselves. And of course, we to them, reciprocal. But again, honing in on that as opposed to labels of wanting it to be a certain way, rushing to that point, losing sight of our spark. I called the book How to Get Everything You Want Out of Love and Life Without Losing Your Spark. Focusing on that, I think, really will help lock us in and help turn our radar on in a better way.
Yeah. So we've just kind of dispelled one of the common like myths around love. What's another myth or belief around love or even confidence that's quietly ruining people's lives?
Well, I think another one that I talk about, that people talk about, is that love isn't just a feeling. If anything, love is not a feeling. It's a choice. It's a verb. It's a thing. It's an act. It's an action. I think so often, speaking of phrases that I don't like settle down. The other phrase is, do I feel in love? I think is a tough question to get clarity from. Do I feel in love with this person? Do I feel in love? Well, hopefully you do feel in love, right? But ultimately, feelings come and go. But the ultimate thing you should look at are actions, of course. Like you could break down any feeling and pinpoint the action that made you feel that way. Feelings fluctuate, especially after, to your point, of the honeymoon phase. any semblance of lasting love is going to come from small choices. Back to what we were talking about earlier, doing the dishes, doing the small things. Those are the choices that we need to look at. And then hopefully, yeah, you feel the full body effect of feeling in love, but to only look at it through the lens of, in this moment, do I feel in love? Well, a lot of the time you're not going to, especially once you're past those five phases. So to think about love as a feeling, but love as a choice. What are the choices that I make and that they make? And use that to gauge the relationship as opposed to just feelings.
Yeah, and I think that's like a hard truth for people to accept because people have this belief that love is supposed to be sunshines and rainbows and you get the jitters and the butterflies and all these things when really it's like the real love, like Sahil Bloom, who I know you know as well, talks about like falling in love is easy, like growing in love is like what really is could be the challenge. I think it becomes the challenge because it might not be as exciting as like the initial dopamine rush you get from meeting that person. And then also people are convinced that when that dopamine feeling goes away, does that mean that this person isn't my person? It's like no, like your like hormones have just kicked in the way they're supposed to. You know what I mean?
It's a lot more like physiological and biological than we think. Like we trick ourselves quite frequently. I talk about other ways to help gauge the health of a relationship in light of that as well. I talk about the concept of consideration versus declaration. Declaration is big, bold signs of love. You see it a lot in Miami, right? First date going to, Poppy Steak in Miami and picking up in a rental Lambo and a $1,000 bouquet of roses, right? Big declarations of love. That's fine and that's great. The real test, to my point earlier about love, the art of noticing, is consideration. Like how locked into considerate acts of love, considerate love languages, if you will, are they and are you? That is what you look for once you're past the declaration phase, is consideration. And then also, I would say within that is like honesty with yourself. I talk about something in the book called a blind spot, which is basically the idea that if you BS yourself and you BS other people, and the fact of maybe you lie to yourself about what you want, and maybe you aren't fully truthful to other people about what you want, the whole idea of you can't is not true. Researchers have shown that the more you develop a blind spot, which makes you fall for other people's. So it's a somewhat obvious takeaway that the more clarity you have around what you actually need and want, and the more you actually express that and you don't BS about it, the more you'll be able to spot people who don't have it to offer, especially in light of declaration and consideration. The fact that some people aren't fully committed, but they're very capable of doing big declarative acts of love. And if you're BSing yourself about what you actually need, you'll think that's enough. So I think it all comes around, right? The idea of knowing the purpose of a relationship, finding clarity around it, speaking to it, realizing that it should exist within the idea of amplification and that acorn of your essence. I think that will really, really help you long term.
Yeah, we have like some, I don't want to call them rules, but like some things that in our relationship we've kind of developed that I think have kind of helped with the small things. One is, Erica loves to cook. And so, when I try to cook for her, the kitchen normally smokes. So she's like, hey, just let me handle the cooking. But I do my best to do the dishes because it's like, I feel like that's like the natural give and take with that. And, you know, I know people typically only give flowers like on, holidays, anniversaries, Mother's Day and stuff. Like I've always been like, hey, like when the flowers I get you die, I'll do my best to replace them as soon as possible. So that way, it's like this ever growing thing to where it's not like some like big thing where if like we get into like an argument, there's a big bouquet of flowers the next day where it feels like transactional, where it's just like I'm doing this because I love and I care about you, and I know you love flowers, so I'm going to follow through with how I know you like to receive love. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, I mean, it's like you're creating the foundation as opposed to waiting for it to erode and then doing one big overhaul and construction on it. Yeah, I mean, again, I think we're circling the idea of little things here is what makes the big thing work. So yeah, I mean, I totally see that.
And I think the little things protect the relationship. I think if you compound the little things enough over time, you have more wiggle room for the disagreements and the arguments. Not to say that you should like purposefully do that. But I think when you have a strong foundation that both people know that you love and care for each other because of actions that have preceded that, like when things come up, it's not as big of a thing because there's not this deep seated resentment because you guys haven't like seen each other spend time together. My main priority is like to be best friends first above all else. Like no matter what, whether we're having a disagreement, whether we're doing anything fun, like that's number one priority because everything else kind of comes and goes. You know what I mean? And I think that you just have to maintain that frame of mind while also doing the work to further understand yourself because relationships are not perfect. Like relationships are can be very very challenging when you have two people that are growing together and then we're sold this idea that you read a meme on Instagram that your relationship should look like this, and if it doesn't it means it's failing. And so people are bought into this idea that perfection equals health. And in my mind, perfection equals unhealthy. If you're not having conflict, if you're not having some tension, I feel like the relationship is definitely subconsciously on the rocks.
Well, I actually want to go. I really like the idea of like friends first and foremost and priority, because think about what the dynamic is with a friend. They bring out a side of you that is likely sometimes dormant because you don't have the right spark for it. Like let's say like you're out with your friends and they're like, "Case, tell that joke again," and you tell the joke and you feel that confidence and that social confidence rise, or Case, let's do this. Let's go. Whatever, let's go work out or let's go mountain biking. It brings out that adventure in you. Like that is the essence here of what we're talking about, amplification. I talk in the book about this thing that they social scientists refer to as the Michelangelo phenomenon, which is just the idea that, similar to how the artist Michelangelo sculpted the statue of David out of allegedly one slab of marble, chipped away until it was in its final best form, your partner helps you reveal your best self. Best self being this idea of, your most enthusiastic, outgoing version of yourself. The whole book, and I'm sure you'd agree, is, the idea is like it's on you to create your best self. But like you don't get 100% of your best self. There are people in your life whose purpose is to bring out that last 2% of yourself, and that is their purpose in your life. And I like the idea of looking at it through the lens of how your friends do that. They bring out your spontaneous side, your weird side, your unfiltered side. And I think applying that to a partner as opposed to rushing into soulmate, seriousness, lifetime commitment, dating from fear of loneliness is such a more healthy way to analyze it and to have something to look forward to and to really tap into playfulness. So I actually really, really like that idea of the, friends. Think about how your friends bring out the best in you.
And I think the next layer of that is being able to like kind of call out your partner, not in a coaching manner. And I think over the years I've had to work on this, given the fact that I've been a personal trainer for over 15 years, and that's been like my life. But in a way where you're elevating them because they're not being their best or whatever. And I think friends do that as well. Friends will call you out if you're like acting like a jerk or if you're like not following through. What have you found to be effective to like, when it comes to accountability in a relationship without coming across as being like a dictator?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's a fine line between being critical and being constructive and the motivation behind it. I don't know. My girlfriend and I always joke like anytime we're giving someone like advice that might require a habit change or behavior change, we always start usually with the sentence of, "I'm only saying this because I have your best interests in mind," which is like something that a parent would say to you, right? But like, I think even just like voicing that is important because that's why you're saying that thing. You want them to help chisel away to that final 2%, and that's why you're saying the thing. It's for them. It's not to alleviate you of some frustration or for them to become how you want them to be. And I think it's important, obviously, that you voice that in whatever way is possible. For us, it's I have your best interests in mind, so, and we speak to it. And it's not from a place of annoyance and not from a place of fixing. It's from a place of wanting them to tap into that acorn, that essence, and voicing that in a playful way. Even I think is really helpful.
And you remind like the playful thing is like, you know, super important to bring up too, because I think even like poking fun at conflict, after the fact, or poking fun at how what somebody did to you, like I think that can kind of like also like bring things back together, because you're acknowledging that you're kind of past the seriousness of whatever it was, and then also remaining playful in the relationship.
I mean, playfulness is medicine for sure. Shared humor is medicine. All these things that I think are, and it's the purpose. Like if you're not laughing, well, what are we doing here? Right? It's too serious. You can't be too serious. I just did a quote the other day where I really like the word tomfoolery. I think it's a funny word. I was like, that's the point of a relationship, is to create some tomfoolery together, some playfulness, some silliness. And I think we've lost sight of that. So let's bring it back and let's speak to it and let's create it.
Let's bring it back. Well, Case, this has been awesome. I'm really, thankful to call you a good friend, and also I love your content. I think your content helps a lot of people. I think you've got a great gift at cutting through the noise and sharing like real life advice to help elevate people without, falsely leading them to some level of toxic positivity. So thanks, man.
Well, thank you. The feeling is mutual, and it's always great chatting with you. So thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
You got it, man. And when does the book come out? Where can people buy it? Can they pre-order it now and stuff?
They can pre-order it now, casekenny.com. Comes out August 19th. Doing all kinds of bonuses right now for pre-order. So if you want a free journal, you want some free stuff, definitely pre-order it. Otherwise, it's out on August 19th.
Amazing, man. Well, go to casekenny.com and get the book. Like I've said, Case puts out some of the best content there is on life, relationships, and he's just the real deal. So I highly recommend people go check that out.